Hello, this is Clint with Wagner Energy Services. You're listening to the Local Energy Podcast.
Wade, how's it going?
Not bad. How are you?
It's good to see you. I know we hung out yesterday for a bit in Tulsa. I got to check out your city, which was great. Yeah, I got some good food, hung out, got some coffee. I think you talked about lacrosse with Maceo for a bit.
Quite a bit. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Hey, let me ask you a question. So, okay, you've been to Oklahoma City a couple times now. You've been to Tulsa once. You spent very little time in Tulsa. What's your take on the two cities?
I am, I don't know. I like the energy of Oklahoma City from a nightlife perspective. I feel like there's more to do here at night. But that said, I've not been in Tulsa at night either. But Tulsa just seems more laid back. And then the coffee shop we went to, there were so many people walking in and out, business meetings, oil and gas conversation at like every table. It just felt I felt at home more so.
Okay.
I was on a business trip, maybe that's the right way to put it. But
Okay.
yeah. Going back, and I don't think I shared this with you yesterday, but I met up with Reed Goodman last week at Nate, and we had a conversation about cowboy hats. And so he took his hat off. We're at a Mexican restaurant, and he's telling me, he's like, cowboy hats are like 3 to 4 times more expensive than they were probably 2 or 3 years ago. And I was like, why is that? And he's like, well, you've got all these Tyler Sheridan movies that are coming out, like Yellowstone. So the price of these hats Landman price is going up on these hats. And so there was this massive influence on, from film into like reality, right? And so
Okay.
I'm kind of using that as a way to share that our guest today is Rickey Bird. He's the writer and director of the Kern Oil movie. And Rickey, I'm so excited to have you on. How's your day going? And I'm just this conversation, I've been ear to ear smiling all day as we got ready for it. So
I've been doing good, and yeah, Landman has helped me with the Kern Oil film as well. A lot of people are excited to see it because of Billy Bob. So yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah, California, the Hollywood, vibe. I mean, your background, you're an oil man from Taft. You're still working the oil field yourself as you're producing this. I guess I'm really curious, like if we could start maybe at the beginning, which is, how, like what got you into the oil field, and obviously third generation seems like there's a heritage there, but what kind of kept you attached to it, and then what brought you into film? I think that's another interesting piece because I'll tell you, like from just producing this podcast, it's a lot of work, like making film and art and trying to find storylines that people are interested in. But we can get into all that. But let's start out with Rickey Bird. How'd you get into oil field and production?
so I'm a third generation. My dad worked in oil. My grandfather did, and then didn't want to get into oil, but then I had my son really young, and that was kind of my option. And then it kind of, it's I just kind of got pulled into it, and then I've been doing it since 2001. And then I started doing my own films about 2004, and it was weird because usually those two parts of my life are separate because I work drilling, so usually you work 7 days or 2 weeks and you're off for the same amount of time. So on my off time, I'd be shooting films and going all around and trying to learn different ways to shoot movies and stuff. And this was a lot before YouTube and all these other outlets were around. So it was difficult at first, and now with technology, it's been a lot easier. But in 2022, my dad committed suicide. And so usually I didn't blend my films with the oil stuff. It's two different worlds, but I thought that it was necessary to kind of tell the story of how people in Kern County are struggling whenever we get overregulated, and it causes people to take their own lives or go back to prison or move out of the county. And I thought that my dad's story was pretty common. I know a few other people that have taken their life due to loss of work or financial struggles because of the overregulation. And we get it compared a lot to coal and all this stuff, but the bottom line is that California uses 1.8 million barrels of oil a day, and the demand is still there, and it's basically politics that have kept us from producing here locally. So I think that my goal here is to kind of show how oil is the history of Kern County. I've lived in Bakersfield my entire life. and pumping units all around me, and it's one of those things where we're used to it, but the outside people doing the legislation or people that are anti-oil don't really realize how much they affect this community. And oil is one of the weird things too, where if you protest it, you're using oil products to do so. And it's the same thing with this film, and we put the disclaimer in the film is without oil, we wouldn't be able to make movies, or you wouldn't be able to watch the film. So
Interesting. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in California, I mean, I'm in Oklahoma City right now, and there's, I think I mentioned this to Wade. I mean, you can walk right into a meeting in oil and gas. Like you go to a brewery, right? And there's an oil and gas group that's hanging out and having a conversation, or they got a PowerPoint up, and it's just part of like the natural fabric, I think, of the culture. And in California, when you want to go to, a SIPA event, right? I remember very clearly a very different experience was, how'd you find us, right? Like we're an but who are you, why are you trying to come to our event? Like it's very protective, because it's just not the same culture, right? There's
Right.
very much a divide. And I think as I'm watching some of the content you have on your website, recognizing many of the faces, Holmes and Western, and I mean just some
Yeah.
general icons. I mean, just they're icons, I don't know how else to put it.
Right.
And you grew up around that, but when you're trying to come up with this documentary, and kind of determining the story, like, and obviously you have a background with it, but like, how do you develop the storyline? Because obviously this is not just to appeal to people that are in the oil field necessarily. You're trying to, I'd imagine, convey something to a larger audience. So how do you accomplish that? Because it's not an easy task. I mean, really, any conversation oil and gas in California it's an uphill battle. So how do you craft that story?
Yeah. It's tough. My dad's side of the family is from Henrietta, Oklahoma, so we spent a lot of time in Oklahoma. I was just there last year. But we say that basically it's the same. There's a lot of Okies here in Bakersfield too. Not a lot of places you get fried okra and catfish. But I think, to me, I have the constant conversation with people that are pro oil and people that are anti oil, and I think that it's given me a different perspective, because there are things that I don't agree with that go on in oil, and there are things that I do agree with that go on in oil. And I think when someone acts like there's no problems with their side, I think that's not a good way to look at it. I think we all need to be open-minded and think objectively to the idea of oil. But the bottom line is that we use a lot of it. And there are some things that oil doesn't need to be in, but there are a lot of things that we use that it does need to be in. I love, I again love making movies, and all that is possible with oil.
Yeah.
And I think that telling a story like that's really tough, because my audience, when we were making a film, and I usually do horror movies or like some wild grindhouse type stuff. So I know my audience, I know what they want to see, with this, it was kind of really tough, because I didn't want to do a puff piece that's like, I don't know if you guys saw that Bill Gates thing on Netflix a few years back, where it's just like a puff piece on Bill Gates on Netflix. And I didn't want to do something like that. I wanted to do something that was, kind of realistic. And, I feel like it is biased. I will agree. It is very biased. I tried to get anti-oil people to interview, and they declined. And it is tough, because we were a very small crew, and I've never done a full length documentary, so that's been really tough. We interviewed almost 50 people over the course of 2 years. We had like over 15 terabytes of footage. We were begging, stealing, and borrowing. We were trying to get onto, some rigs wouldn't let us film, so we're trying to get the footage to explain the story. And, it was a lot of work. And, thankfully we had some really important people. Once it started getting momentum, they started jumping on board and like getting us into different places we probably wouldn't have been able to. But I understand, because typically in independent film, everybody, when you're doing it, it doesn't seem as awesome and when it's until, when it's just me and a few other guys trying to film something with, very minimal crew, it's not that exciting. But I think now that the trailers have came out, they can see the quality of what it is. I think that it's gained a lot of momentum. I mean, But again, the story is for people that are kind of in California against oil and just kind of doing like a light tap of saying, hey, you know, you're affecting our community here in Kern County. You're still using the oil, you know, so it's kind of like, why get the oil from overseas when we can make it right? We can pull it out of the ground right here, the safest and the cleanest in the world, really. You know, we use water-based mud. We have a lot of drilling practices because of overregulation in California. And again, this isn't like a screw regulation thing. I think regulations, there's a happy medium between left and right, and regulations in oil. I definitely believe that, but it's like now the pendulum has swung so far that, you know, good hardworking people are losing their job, and, you know, you got to be realistic at some point. And, you know, again, I think it's said in the documentary over and over again, but we're not getting off the oil. We're just importing it from other people.
I mean, just you know, we're shutting down refineries now in California. We do import most of our oil. I mean, if you look at you just look at the marine traffic right now of tankers offshore is just increasing, right? And
Yeah.
but to kind of like, I guess, pivot over. So Wade knows this because he gives me new movies to watch all the time, but I'm not very well versed in movies at all. Like, I think Wade gave me 4 movies to watch last year. I think most of them were Christopher Nolan movies too, Wade. I might have been wrong.
A few of them were, but it was also Tombstone, which he had never seen.
Wow. So you never seen Tombstone? Yeah.
I mean, it's just for whatever reason, like I've always been more on like the music side. Like I'd rather like listen to just go do something, listen to music. But again, going back to my appreciation for movies is kind of growing because of Wade. I mean, I watched Interstellar, and then I watched Tenet, which I've watched Tenet now, Wade, like probably 5 or 6 times on the airplane as I've been flying, just because it's a good story. But like Rickey, as you're making film, right? And like the rest of these films too, like it sounds like you're into some different genres as well. But like, who's your favorite director? Like, do you have a flavor that you kind of go towards?
I like a lot of them, but I like them. I don't have one director that I like the most. Every director, I like something different about them. Like Nolan, for example, I love Memento. Memento is probably one of in my top 10 films Nolan's done. And I think like I like him because of, you know, his intricate storytelling, and, you know, I really, you know, do dig his vibe. I loved the Oppenheimer movie. I thought it was great. Very cool to watch on IMAX, you know. But the thing I like about film is all these people come together. You have musicians, you have people that do costume design, sound design, art deco, you know, all these artists coming together to make one thing. And I think when you see behind the scenes and you see hundreds of people on the set and all these different artists contributing, even to minimal things that we don't even think about, like logo design in the background for companies or whatever, all these different things are super, super interesting. And that's why I love movies. But I love Spielberg. I get to actually go meet Robert Rodriguez, which he's one of my top guys too. He's the one that did the Sin City movies. They're really good. I would recommend those.
Yeah.
And I really like, I mean, I love George Lucas just on the fact of I am a Star Wars nerd for sure. There's probably some Star Wars stuff.
Yeah, we're gonna say as
back
there.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I love old Hollywood. I have my custom Frankenstein thing my buddy made for me. And on this side, I have all different autographs. I have like over 70 on my wall of different people. Actually, he said Tombstone. This is Tombstone right here. Val Kilmer right there. Signed some Tombstone. Doc Holliday. Yeah. So I am definitely a love. So there's not one director I like. I like a lot of directors for different reasons. But yeah, Nolan's really, really awesome. He's a good one. He's a good one to definitely watch. I would say I like Hitchcock. North by Northwest is a really good Alfred Hitchcock movie. And then Children of Men is a really cool movie. If you like, depending on what kind of movies you like, Children of Men's a really, really cool movie. I don't know if you guys seen that one with Clive Owen. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
It's got that amazing what isn't it like a one? What's it?
Yeah,
Like
one or-
continuous shot
yeah.
beginning where
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got like they were like the first ones that did oneers, I feel, that were really good. Besides like Goodfellas, Martin Scorsese's another one. I love Martin Scorsese. He's kind of hit and miss lately, but that Goodfellas, man, Goodfellas is probably one of my top mob movies for sure, but
Heat.
Yeah.
You got to throw Heat in there.
oh, Heat's awesome. Michael Mann. Yeah, we actually just saw last night the Crime 101, which is nothing compared to Heat. It was not really that great, but yeah. It was okay. It's worth a watch, but
Right. All right.
yeah. So
It's hard to compare.
yeah.
There's a quote that I'd written down. So I'm a huge Steve Carell fan. I love The Office. I love like his style of comedy. And I think it's because it's nostalgic, right? Like it came out when I was in high school. My friends and I would talk about every new episode. But he has a quote. So he always had the room very cold, right? And so I wanted to ask an actual film director, but he would always say like comedy is cold and like horror films are supposed to be hot on set, right? Like there's like a setting for the temperature. Is there some truth to that, or is it sort of just Steve Carell trying to make the room colder?
I think they're different beasts for sure. But it also depends on your crew and your director. Like when we're shooting horror films, it does get intense because we're trying to make it intense for the the actor or actress to act and kind of find that vibe. I think with comedy it's tough because you're going to be really quiet. When we shot comedies in the past, it's definitely people want to laugh but you can't laugh, so there is a hard vibe with that, which makes it. But I could see his point to it. I think depending on what kind of horror movie you're doing, if I'm doing like a Friday the 13th and there's a lot of suspense with the killing and the scared, but then if there's something wild like Planet Terror with Robert Rodriguez again, Planet Terror, where it's just action and all this stuff moving, all these moving parts, that is going to be more intense. But usually, like if you're thinking of Steve Carell is a genius too. I love that dude. You're thinking like Anchorman or something. They're doing a lot of improv where they're just letting the cameras roll and they're saying all this crap, and I'm sure there's 20 people behind the camera trying not to laugh. You know what I mean? So yeah.
And then in moving into doing a whole documentary, you're just probably contending with weather and real people and trying to make sure that you're like the hardest part for me with even doing like talking to people right all the time is like I always tell people like my goal is to bring out the best in somebody. Yeah. And a guy on Twitter was like, what the hell do you mean by bring out the best in somebody? And it's like, okay, well, I got someone on the other end of the camera, right? That they're telling their story and who they are. And, this is really so that, I want to learn more about you. But at the same time, I could ask questions that you'd be like, I don't want to answer that. Or like, how do you, like, as you're sitting in front of somebody interviewing them, developing those questions, like how long are you going through these interviews to like find those nuggets, right? Because there is always one or two things someone says and you're like, man, I never thought of that. But how long does it take you to find that, in an interview?
Well, this one was tough, and I had a little bit of an edge on it because I work with all these people and I know them and they knew my dad. And, these are, there was not too many people that were outside of the realm that I knew already, besides like, we did like the mayor of Taft, and there's a few folks that I didn't know, but now I, know now. So that was kind of tough. But what I did is, I spent a lot of time thinking, because I'm like, how are we going to do this documentary? Because everybody's like, oh, you need to put this in there. You need to put that in there. So then I just went in and I spent like maybe about a week, and I'm like, what are the most important parts? And then I designed a chapter setup. So we did the documentary in chapters to kind of tell the story, right? And then we're like, how will the story evolve? And then I pitched it to a couple people that were anti-oil, because that's my audience. And I was like, okay, what are these things that you want to know? And then we developed questions based on that. So the first, I would say the first 30 interviews we did, we just did the same set of 20 questions. And then after we shot them, we were giving people about an hour. We were doing about an hour plus each interview, right? And it was tough because we were shooting on 3 cameras. So we're shooting on these red cameras, which in 4K, it the data and all that stuff, it takes up a lot of space, right? So then we're like, well, we got to calm this down, because I wanted something to feel cinematic, because at the end of the day, I want to be entertaining, I want people to be entertained, I was trying not to, we were trying to stray away from being like a PBS documentary, So, so we asked those questions. Well, then we're like, man, these is a lot of cameras and a lot of questions. So then we kind of toned those questions down. And then we went through, because it was funny. I would ask one person one question, or I'd ask the same question to multiple people, and I would get different answers that would actually work in another chapter. So it was really interesting. Like, I would be like, hey, how is Kern County different than any other oil field? Because a lot of guys worked in Kern County and then Oklahoma or North Dakota or wherever, right? And so when they answer the question, like, some would tell me it's about family, some would talk about the formations to drill in, and there's all these different things from that one question. So it was super interesting. And, like I said, I've never done a documentary. So it was a lot. Usually when you shoot a film, you know what scene you have, you know how many takes you have. So I could note my takes really while I'm shooting and say, hey, we're going to use these takes. Then we kind of smash them into a scene and we know, hey, this is not going to work or whatever. This is like, crap, I remember this guy said this, maybe we can put that there. And then you spend hours looking for that one shot or that one line, watching, and it does get very tedious. So there might be things that we have missed on the edit where we're like, but when we did our first cut of the documentary, it was 2 hours and 45 minutes. And then we're like, man, this is too long. So then we had to cut stuff. And then it's kind of like, man, it's so good. But then we had to cut it, and, it is, yeah, it's tough. But we didn't want that Zack Snyder cut that's like 3 hours, So
It's so much better though. It's so much better than the theatrical. I didn't like the theatrical. And then I watched his and I was like, I did not remember this movie at all.
Yeah, it was like a total different thing. So I think, and we're going to take some of these snippets out and put them online. So, because there are some good stories and good, I think there's a lot of good information there. And again, this isn't like it's not like a Dateline episode where there's only 3 people being interviewed. This is like all stories combined from, CEOs of companies to guys that run Roughneck to, politicians to mayors to, there's such a wide variety because it's about the people. It's not like an apologetic thing for big oil by any means. It's like, how do these things affect people? And that's what that was the toughest thing, is kind of like figuring out, and I really wish we got some people that were anti-oil to interview, but none of them would. I mean, we tried to reach out to CARB to get an interview. They declined. There's a couple people locally that declined. I went to a couple CARB meetings and kind of had to set the record straight with CARB because that's one thing, a big argument, especially in Kern County, is the air quality here. And the air quality in Bakersfield is really bad, but it's not from the oil fields. Even CARB says that oil extraction is less than 3% of the air issue here. Pollution, yeah. So basically, it's all Sacramento and all these other places. All their smog comes down into the valley and kind of just sits here. So I asked CARB, I'm like, are you guys going to have like some big air filters, or what's your plan to actually clean the air? And their answer was just stop driving cars. So, it's, that it makes it real difficult. I mean, we're not innovating anything to kind of keep that air or clean up the air here. And I don't think it would be that tough, because after it rains here in Bakersfield, it is beautiful. And, we get a lot of shots after it rains. February and January are great times to film in the valley because you can actually see the mountains. I mean, we had a bad storm. I was on the rig last week and I'm driving from the rig and I'm looking out and you could actually see the mountains and it looks so beautiful. It's a shame.
Yeah. It does seem though, I mean, at least I think from talking with folks and going to meetings and all, it's like the sentiment is sort of flipping, like maybe not on California as a state,
Right.
on energy, but in Kern, or just talking with like drilling permits, like let's just go there. Like it's like that might be opening up sooner rather than later. So, at least in a bigger way. So, I don't know. I'm hopeful as a lifelong Californian. No, I mean, I born and raised in San Diego, and my wife and family, they surf and spend time in Huntington Beach and up and down Ventura and all of that. And it's it's just, I look at it too from a cultural perspective, right? Like, I don't know, growing up around old cars, right? I know they wanted to like, okay, you can't have old cars in California anymore, and they figure there's all so many things that we lose if we lose this fight, right? And anyways, I'm just excited that someone's out there telling the story. So as we kind of move to wrap up here, the movie comes out February 27th. Is that right?
Yeah, so it comes out February 27th for our first premiere, and then we're gonna probably do a couple screenings throughout the state. I have some people reaching out to me, which has been awesome. So we'll hopefully have a
Yeah.
couple screenings here and get people just in the know about how they actually use oil and how it benefits their lives. And I think once people start realizing that and looking at the numbers, there's a lot of realistic people that have just been strayed in the wrong in a wrong direction on oil. If you Google documentaries right now, all you see is really gloom and doom, and misinformation. So hopefully we'll clear a little bit of that out, and people will understand how important oil is in their life. Stop hating on us so much, because we're just out there working our butts off to give you oil, and we don't. We use every drop of oil that Kern County produces right now. So
Yeah, and it's the cleanest barrel of oil I think in the world, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's together, so it
Yeah.
is. Yeah. Well, there's a theater in Encinitas called La Paloma. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's a cool like it's right off the 101. I see it all the time as I'm going through. My family spend time going down to the beach there, but I think it'd be really cool it's kind of a hippie town, but it'd be fun to put your film down there and just heck yeah, get the crowd going. But
Yeah.
you know how it is.
Yeah, I'm
Okay, let me know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to see if I can get a hold of somebody there. But Ricky, where can people find you? Where they can find the movie, so we can go see when the show times are and get our hands on it when it's out.
So the website for the film is kernoilmovie.com. If you want to see any of the other movies we've done, hecticfilms.com is our production company. And then, so we'll have posts and stuff on the Kern Oil, but we're on TikTok, we're on Facebook and Instagram. So all under Kern Oil Movie.
Awesome. Well, Ricky, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you all for listening. Yeah, it's been great. I was like excited. I told my wife, I'm like, I'm talking to someone who does film today. And she's like, that's not in your wheelhouse. And I'm like, I know, but that's why it's fun. So Wade's here to kind of guide the ship there. Wade, thank you for being here. We're Local Energy. You can find us on localenergy.com. Until next week, y'all take care. Thanks.